There is a sound the land of Kazakhstan makes. You cannot capture it with an ordinary microphone. You cannot really hear it with the ear alone. You feel it through the soles of your feet, through your ribs, through something older than language that wakes up when a person stands in the middle of a real steppe in true silence. It is not the sound of wind. Wind is a different voice. Wind speaks from above. This sound comes from below, from depth, as if the earth itself is trying to say something. Maybe it is speaking because it remembers, and it remembers a great deal. Chapter 1. The Gifts That Changed the World. Let us begin, not with war, but with an apple. Take any apple in the world. It does not matter whether it is a Fuji, a Gala, a Golden Delicious, or an old village variety with no official name. If you trace its ancestry far enough back, you arrive in the foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains, in the wild forests of what is now southeastern Kazakhstan. This is where Malus sieversii grows, the wild apple, surviving here for millions of years, producing fruit in astonishing diversity: red, yellow, green, striped, sour, sweet, small, oversized, twisted, and fragrant. It is the proven genetic ancestor of every cultivated apple variety on Earth today. Genetic analysis has confirmed it. The mountain forests of Kazakhstan are the apple's original home. Almaty, Kazakhstan's largest city, carries that memory in its very name. It means the place of apples, the rich apple place. Once, these mountain slopes were thick with wild orchards. Some were cleared during Soviet-era expansion. What remains is irreplaceable, a living genetic archive older than most recorded civilizations. And then there are tulips. For most people in the Western world, tulips belong to the Netherlands. Dutch fields, spring postcards, perfect color rose. But tulips did not begin there. Their deeper origin leads back to Central Asia. Wild species like Greig's tulip and Kaufmann's tulip from Kazakhstan's mountain valleys became direct ancestors of many cultivated varieties that later traveled west along trade routes. Centuries passed before those flowers transformed into a European obsession. Their true beginning was here. And there is a third gift, perhaps the most consequential of all: the horse. Around 6,000 years ago, on the northern steppes of what is now Kazakhstan, people of the Botai culture did something that changed human civilization permanently. They domesticated the horse. Not for slaughter only, they rode it, they milked it, they trained it. Archaeologists found the proof in bone structure, in residues of mare's milk in pottery, in bridle wear on ancient teeth. Before this moment, the horse was prey. After it, the horse was partner. And with that partnership, the scale of human ambition expanded permanently. Riders could carry news, goods, weapons, armies, and ideas across distances that had previously meant death or isolation. Every cavalry charge in history, every nomadic migration, every mounted empire from Central Asia to Europe, every long-distance trade route, all of it traces back, in some measure, to this moment in Kazakhstan's steppe, which means that long before Kazakhstan existed as a political entity, this land was already shaping the destiny of the entire human species. And yet, for much of the outside world, Kazakhstan remains a blank space on the mental map. A large country between Russia and China. A name some people recognize, a place very few genuinely understand. That misunderstanding deserves correction. Chapter 2. The Scale of Things. Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country on Earth. Its area exceeds 2.7 million square kilometers, larger than all of Western Europe combined, larger than India, vast beyond comfortable imagination. And yet its population is just over 21 million people, far less than many countries, a fraction of its size. There are regions here the size of Switzerland, where almost no one lives. It is the largest landlocked country in the world, no coastline touching an open ocean. The Caspian Sea lies along its western edge, but the Caspian is a closed inland body of water, disconnected from the world's seas. To move goods, to build relationships, to connect with global markets, Kazakhstan must negotiate geography every single day through pipelines, rail corridors, air routes, and careful diplomacy with neighbors who are themselves enormous, complex, and powerful. Russia to the north, China to the east, three smaller but significant Central Asian nations to the south, and the Caspian corridor opening west toward the Caucasus and Europe. Kazakhstan is surrounded. That is a strategic fact as much as a geographic one. And maybe that is part of why the culture that grew from this land developed such a deep comfort with movement. When you cannot break through in one direction, you learn to navigate in all of them. Chapter 3: The Golden Man and the Unread Message. In 1969, archaeologists near Issyk, not far from Almaty, opened a burial mound and found one of the most important discoveries in Central Asian history. A young warrior, around 18 years old, buried in the 5th or 4th century before the Common Era, and dressed in a costume covered with more than 4,000 individual gold pieces, each one crafted separately, each depicting animals, birds, mountains, or solar symbols. His tall conical headdress was decorated with golden rays. He wore golden boots and a golden sword. He had been given gold as if gold were breath. He became known as the Golden Man, Altin Adam. He belonged to the Saka people, the Central Asian branch of the great Scythian world that stretched from the Black Sea to the Altai Mountains. These were steppe nomads whom the Persians feared and the Greeks wrote about with a mixture of admiration and dread. When Cyrus the Great attacked the Saka queen Tomyris, she defeated and killed him. The story survived. So did the artistic tradition of her people. Saka metalwork was among the finest produced anywhere in the ancient world. The animal style, dynamic, compressed images of predators and prey, birds and horned deer twisted into ornamental form, appeared across Eurasia, carried by trade and contact. It influenced Greek work, Persian art, Siberian design, and its finest expression was found in Kazakh ground. Beside the Golden Man lay a silver bowl. On its surface were 26 marks, arranged in 2 rows. Not decorative, structural, a text. Scholars have studied this inscription for decades. It remains undeciphered. Some believe it is an early form of Turkic script, which would make it 1,000 years older than previously known writing in that tradition. Others think it is Saka language, still almost entirely unknown. A few suggest it is a ritual formula, words meant to be spoken, not read. 26 signs, a few words, or a few phrases, or a name, or a prayer, or a list of what this young man was owed in the afterlife. We do not know. We may never know. It is the most eloquent silence in Kazakhstan's history, a message from 25 centuries ago addressed to us that we still cannot open. The Golden Man today stands at the center of Kazakhstan's national identity. His silhouette appears on the state emblem and in monuments across the country. He represents a truth the country has always known and often struggled to communicate to the outside world. This land was never empty. It was never uncivilized. It produced beauty, refined enough to survive millennia. It produced symbols that still carry weight. Chapter 4: Written in Stone. In the Chuili Mountains northwest of Almaty, a gorge opens between dark rocky hills. On the stone faces, across surfaces that catch the light in particular ways at particular hours, are thousands of carvings. Tamgali, 5,000 petroglyphs placed here across at least 3,000 years by different peoples, different beliefs, different centuries. Bronze Age figures dancing in ceremonial rows, Iron Age hunters with bows drawn, medieval inscriptions in early Turkic script, tribal marks carved generations apart on the same surface. This is not simply a historical site. It is a record of continuity. Sacred space recognized and returned to again and again across thousands of years. In 2004, UNESCO designated Tamgali as a World Heritage Site. Among the carvings, the solar-headed beings stand apart, around 100 of them, human bodies with heads surrounded by radiating lines, halos made of light. Some hold ritual objects, some stand in postures that suggest ceremony, others seem to lead processions. Who were they? Gods, priests, shamans in ceremonial headdress, their authority expressed in golden rays, visions seen in altered states during ritual? The honest answer is, we do not know. And that uncertainty is itself meaningful. Kazakhstan is not only a land with answers, it is a land that preserves great questions, holding them in stone, waiting for someone patient enough to sit with them. Tamgali is the most famous, but it is not alone. Across the mountains of the Altai, the cliffs of Mangistau, the river valleys of the Ili, petroglyphs appear by the thousands. Kazakhstan is one of the richest places on Earth for rock art. Most of it has never been systematically studied. Some of it is already damaged by agriculture, by construction, by simple ignorance. Some has disappeared permanently. Chapter 5. The steppe writes to the sky. There is another kind of mark on this land, even more mysterious. In the Turgai steppe of northern Kazakhstan, satellite imagery has revealed enormous geometric earthworks, crosses, squares, rings, spirals, and swastikas in their ancient pre-cultural meaning, the symbol of solar movement, common across Eurasia for millennia before it was corrupted. These figures range from 100 to 300 meters across. They are made of raised earthen mounds, carefully arranged. From the ground, they are almost invisible. From the air, they are unmistakable. Some are estimated to be 3,000 years old, some possibly older. Their builders left no written explanation. No oral tradition clearly identifies them, but certain geometric figures are aligned with astronomical points. The sunrise at the summer solstice, the sunset at the winter one, suggesting their makers observed the sky with precision and encoded that observation into the landscape at enormous scale. Perhaps these were ritual meeting grounds for seasonal gatherings. Perhaps they were territories marked for spiritual protection. Perhaps they were a form of prayer, written not in words, but in altered earth, addressed to whatever watches from above. Over 200 such formations have been identified in Kazakhstan so far. Most remain unstudied. Some have already been destroyed by modern plowing and road construction, lost before they could be recorded. We will never know what they contained. A civilization wrote messages to the sky. The sky received them. We are only just beginning to read them from satellites, thousands of years too late. Chapter 6. The road that connected everything. For more than 1,000 years, the most important trade network in human history passed through Kazakhstan. The Silk Road was not a single road. It was a network of routes, shifting over centuries, connecting China with Persia, India, the Mediterranean, and the steppe world. Through the cities of the south, Otrar, Taraz, Sauran, Turkestan, Sairam, moved silk and spices, gold and glass, horses and slaves, mathematics and theology, paper and plague. But trade was only the surface. The Silk Road carried ideas the way blood carries oxygen. Buddhism moved from India into Central Asia and China through these routes. Islam spread east from the Arab world along these same corridors. The technology of papermaking traveled from China to the Islamic world to Europe through Kazakhstan. Decimal numerals, astronomical tables, medical knowledge, architectural techniques, all of it crossed these plains. Otrar stood at one of the great junctions, a prosperous city, a center of scholarship. It was also the birthplace of Al-Farabi, who lived in the 9th and 10th centuries and became one of the most important thinkers the Islamic world ever produced. He wrote more than 100 treatises, covering philosophy, logic, politics, mathematics, and music. Arab scholars called him the second teacher, the first being Aristotle. His political philosophy imagined a state governed by reason and virtue, 6 centuries before Thomas More. His work shaped Avicenna. Avicenna shaped medieval European medicine and philosophy. The roots reach back to a city that no longer exists in the steppe of Kazakhstan. Then came the catastrophe. In 1218, the governor of Otrar made a decision that changed the world. He executed a trade delegation sent by Genghis Khan. More than 400 merchants and envoys were killed. Genghis Khan treated this as a declaration of war. He came with armies. What followed was one of the great destructive events in human history. Cities across Central Asia were besieged and reduced. Populations were slaughtered. Irrigation systems that had been built over centuries were dismantled. Otrar itself was taken after months of resistance. The governor was executed by having molten silver poured into his ears, a symbolic punishment matching his greed. The library of Otrar burned. Al-Farabi's manuscripts, the accumulated scholarship of generations, the collected knowledge of a city that sat at the crossroads of civilizations. Ash. Otrar never fully recovered. It lingered on in reduced form, served briefly as a significant center during the Timurid period, and then silently faded by the 16th or 17th century. Not with a bang, simply with the gradual redirecting of trade away from its gates. Without merchants, there is no city. Without a city, there is nothing but a mound in a field. That mound still exists. Its excavated streets, bathhouses, and bazaar foundations confirm what it once was. Most of it remains unexcavated. Objects from the 13th century lie undisturbed, waiting under centuries of accumulated earth. Chapter 7. Turkestan and the poet who chose the common tongue. In the 12th century, a man chose to write poetry in Turkic. This sounds simple. It was not. The literary world of that time operated in Arabic and Persian. Those were the languages of religion, scholarship, and power. Writing in Turkic was a choice to step away from prestige toward people. The people who tended animals, who raised children in yurts, who prayed without understanding the Arabic words of their prayers. Khoja Ahmed Yasawi made that choice. He was a Sufi mystic, a spiritual teacher, and a poet. His hikmet, his wisdoms, reached across the Turkic-speaking world because they were written in a language people actually understood. They spread from Kazakhstan to Anatolia, from Siberia to the Balkans, not through official channels, but through mouths, memorized, sung, repeated across generations. According to tradition, at the age of 63, the age at which the Prophet Muhammad died, Yasawi felt unworthy of living above ground. He descended into a subterranean cell beneath his home in Turkestan and did not emerge for the remainder of his life. He continued teaching from below. He continued writing from below. His humility became a form of spiritual power that outlasted every political structure of his era. Yasawi died in 1166. In 1389, more than 2 centuries later, Timur Tamerlane ordered a grand mausoleum built over his grave. Timur financed it personally. He brought the finest Persian and Samarkand architects and craftsmen. The result was a monumental building with a great turquoise dome, a towering facade, and a vast interior hall. Timur died in 1405, before the building was finished. By tradition, the main portal was left deliberately incomplete, a sign of grief. It remains unfinished to this day. The mausoleum in Turkestan is among the finest examples of Timurid architecture in the world. UNESCO recognized it. Pilgrims recognize it too. Hundreds of thousands arrive each year from across the Turkic world. They sit in the cool interior. They ask questions without speaking them aloud. The building absorbs their presence without comment. Chapter 8. The People Who Kept the Flame. History records the powerful. Kazakhstan's most enduring figures were often something else. Abay Kunanbayev was born in 1845 in the Semipalatinsk region, in a world that was changing around him faster than anyone could manage. Russian imperial expansion was transforming Kazakhstan from a network of independent khanates into a colonial periphery. Old ways were being challenged. New languages were acquiring authority. Abay learned Kazakh from his grandmother and Persian and Arabic from a mullah. Then he entered a Russian school. He read Pushkin in Russian, Lermontov, Tolstoy, Goethe, Byron. And he returned to the steppe with a question. Why should Kazakh people be cut off from this? Why should the shepherd not hear what the world has to say? He translated. He wrote. He created a literary Kazakh capable of expressing ideas it had never before been asked to hold. His 45 sayings of wisdom, short philosophical essays on laziness, vanity, learning, dignity, and moral responsibility are read in Kazakhstan today as naturally as Confucius is read in China. In 2020, on the 200th anniversary of his birth, the United Nations named the year in his honor. One of his sayings, "Not he is wise who knows much, but he who knows what is needed." He wrote this in the 19th century, in a land where most people could not read, for a future that had not arrived yet. It fits the present with eerie precision. Jambil Jabayev was born in 1846. He lived nearly a century, absorbing and then giving back everything that happened to the steppe during his lifetime. He was an Akin, an oral poet who composed and performed in real time, accompanying himself on the Dombra. When the Nazis besieged Leningrad in the Second World War, the Soviet government asked this man, 100 years old, to write something for the people trapped in that city. He wrote, "Leningraders, my children, Leningraders, my pride." His words were broadcast on the city's radio. People who had never seen Kazakhstan and would never see it wept, listening to an old man's voice from the steppe telling them they were not alone. Aliya Moldagulova was 19 years old. She had grown up in an orphanage after her parents died. She volunteered for the Red Army, completed sniper training, and was sent to the front, near Pskov. She killed more than 70 enemy soldiers. The records confirm this. She died in a bayonet charge in January 1944. She was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. She was the only Kazakh woman to receive it. She died at an age when most people are still discovering what they want to become. Olga Suleimanov was a poet and a revolutionary in the only sense that matters, someone who changes something important without a weapon. His 1975 book, Azi-Yar, argued that the Russian medieval epic, The Tale of Igor's Campaign, was deeply saturated with Turkic vocabulary and imagery. Soviet censorship banned the book within 24 hours. The authorities understood perfectly well why it was dangerous. It suggested that Russian cultural identity was not purely Slavic, that it had been shaped by centuries of contact with the Turkic world, that the East was already inside the West's foundational texts. 14 years later, Süleymanov organized the anti-nuclear movement that helped shut down Semipalatinsk. One poet, one movement, one closed test site. Some fights can be won without tanks. Chapter 9. Land of Wounds, the Soviet Legacy. Abai's century became the century of empire, and empire left scars. In the early 1930s, Soviet collectivization policy dismantled the nomadic economy of Kazakhstan with the speed and thoroughness of a calculated operation. Livestock was confiscated, herding routes were closed, sedentarization was enforced. The pastoral system that had sustained Kazakh life for millennia was declared obsolete and eliminated within years. Without animals, there was no food. Without mobility, there was no escape. Without escape, there was only hunger. People died in numbers that are still contested by historians, but were unambiguously catastrophic. Estimates of Kazakh deaths range from 1.5 to more than 2.5 million people. Entire communities disappeared. Others fled across borders into China, Mongolia, Afghanistan, never returning. By 1939, Kazakhs were a minority in their own republic, a consequence of famine, forced settlement, and the flood of settlers sent from elsewhere in the Soviet Union. This was not drought, it was policy. The difference matters. Kazakhstan calls it Ashashilik, the Great Hunger. For decades, it was not spoken of publicly. Under Soviet rule, the famine was a classified embarrassment, not a discussed tragedy. It became part of the silence that families carried. The Gulag accompanied the famine's aftermath. Kazakhstan became one of the primary geographical systems of forced labor in the Soviet Union. Karlag, the Karaganda labor camp system, stretched across hundreds of square kilometers with more than 270 sub-units and over 800,000 prisoners passing through it. Algier, the camp specifically for wives of men who had been arrested or executed, imprisoned women whose only crime was marriage to someone the state had decided to destroy. From Karlag and similar camps across Kazakhstan, many people were released but could not afford to leave, or were prohibited from leaving. They stayed. They built families. They became part of the land. This is one reason modern Kazakhstan is so multi-ethnic. Not only geography created its diversity, tragedy did too. Chapter 10. Atomic Earth, from 1949 to 1989. The Soviet Union tested nuclear weapons in eastern Kazakhstan at the Semipalatinsk polygon. The number was 456 tests. Some were atmospheric detonations, visible from villages, felt in bones and glass and earth. Some were ground level, others were underground. The cumulative yield of energy released over those 4 decades is difficult to fully comprehend. The people living nearby were not evacuated. They were not, in most cases, properly warned. When sky lit up, they were told it was military exercises. Soviet medical teams came periodically to take blood samples and conduct examinations. Results were classified. People were studied, but not informed. They were subjects, not patients. The consequences accumulated across generations. Cancer rates in the affected regions have remained elevated for decades. Thyroid cancer, leukemia, and lung cancer appear at higher frequencies than national averages. Birth defects and genetic mutations have been documented in children and grandchildren of those exposed. Epidemiologists continue to study these populations. The numbers do not improve with time. Around 1.5 million people are estimated to have been affected. In 1989, Olja Süleymanov founded the Nevada Semipalatinsk movement. It gathered people across ethnic, professional, and geographic lines. It built international connections with anti-nuclear activists in the United States, linking the Nevada test site with Semipalatinsk in shared opposition. The political pressure grew until it became impossible to ignore. On August 29, 1991, 4 months before the Soviet Union formally dissolved, Kazakhstan's president signed the decree closing Semipalatinsk, unilaterally, without waiting for Moscow's permission. Then, in 1994, Kazakhstan did something with no modern precedent. It surrendered its nuclear arsenal, the fourth largest nuclear weapons stockpile in the world, more warheads than Britain, France, and China combined, surrendered voluntarily in exchange for security guarantees written into the Budapest Memorandum. No other country in history has voluntarily relinquished power on that scale. August 29th is now the International Day Against Nuclear Tests, established by the United Nations. It was chosen in honor of Kazakhstan's decision. Chapter 11. The Sea That Died and Partially Returned. The Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake on Earth. Its waters supported fishing economies, port cities, ecological systems, and livelihoods across 2 Soviet republics. Aralsk in Kazakhstan and Muynak in Uzbekistan were prosperous fishing towns. Fleets worked the surface. Canneries processed the catch. The sea was a fact of life as stable as mountains. Soviet planners needed cotton. Cotton requires irrigation on a massive scale. The Amu Darya and the Sia Darya, the 2 rivers that fed the Aral for millennia, were diverted into endless canal networks spread across the desert. The decision was made. The consequences were known and disregarded. The sea began to shrink. By 1980, it had lost half its volume. By the 1990s, fishing vessels sat on dry ground, kilometers from any water. Shorelines retreated so far that former port towns became landlocked. The lake bottom turned to exposed salt and chemical residue. Decades of pesticides and industrial runoff now dried into powder, lifted by wind and carried across hundreds of kilometers. The dust from the former Aral seabed has been found in snow samples from the Himalayas and Greenland. Health consequences followed. Anemia rates among women in the region climbed. Kidney disease increased. Respiratory illness spread. The dust was not merely salt. It carried carcinogens, organochlorine pesticides, and industrial pollutants that had settled to the bottom over decades of Soviet agriculture. Then, Kazakhstan decided to act on the part it could control. The Kokoral Dam, completed in 2005 with support from the World Bank, separated the northern part of the former sea, the small Aral, from the southern portion still draining away. The Sia Darya's water was retained. Levels rose, salinity dropped from 70 grams per liter to close to normal marine levels. Fish returned. Fishing resumed. Aralsk, which had watched water vanish over decades, saw the horizon of the sea return. 49 million saxaul trees have been planted on the exposed seabed. This slow-growing desert plant stabilizes salt crust, reduces dust storms, and gradually restores soil structure. It is one of the largest ecological restoration projects in human history. The Aral will not return to its original size. The southern portion is largely irreversible, but the northern recovery proved something important. Environmental catastrophe does not always have to be the final word. Action, sustained over time, changes the outcome. Not entirely, but enough to matter. Chapter 12. How a nomadic culture survives. A culture that cannot write its values into stone must find another medium. The yurt is the clearest answer. Circular, portable, warm in extreme cold, resistant to steppe wind, and assembled without a single nail or bolt. The wooden frame and felt covering create a dwelling that can be erected or dismantled in hours. Inside, space follows cultural logic. Orientation, position at the table, placement of objects, all carry meaning. The shanirak, the circular crown at the top, serves simultaneously as chimney, window, and symbolic connection to the sky. Its form appears on Kazakhstan's national emblem. When you move, you do not accumulate stone. You accumulate knowledge, skill, song. The dombra, with its 2 strings, becomes the portable memory of a people. Kazakh instrumental music, kui, is not merely melody, it is narrative. Each piece has a name, a story, an emotional content. The gallop of horses, the death of a warrior, a mother's longing, a joke between old men, the sound of wind on dry grass. These pieces were composed and transmitted orally across centuries before anyone thought to write them down. Masters taught students, students became masters. The chain held. UNESCO recognized the art of the dombra kui as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The eagle hunters of Kazakhstan carried a different kind of bond. A berkut, a golden eagle, is taken as a chick, raised in close proximity to a human being, trained to hunt fox and hare, occasionally wolf. The partnership develops over years. The bird learns to return to the arm. The hunter learns the bird's body language, its moods, its signals. They develop trust through repetition and time. After 5 to 10 years, the eagle is released. This is not a failure. It is the completion of the arrangement. The bird is returned to wildness, to live out the remainder of its life freely. It is one of the most philosophically generous relationships in any traditional hunting culture. You give the animal your time and care. It gives you its skill and presence, and then you let it go. UNESCO recognized the art of the eagle hunters in 2016. Kumis, fermented mare's milk, is another carrier of the culture. Slightly carbonated, mildly alcoholic, rich in probiotics and vitamin C, it has been described by observers for centuries with fascination. In the 19th century, sanatoriums across Russia sent patients with tuberculosis to the Kazakh steppe to drink kumis under supervised conditions. The treatment had a real effect. The bacteriostatic compounds in fermented mare's milk are still being studied by food scientists. Leo Tolstoy made the journey to drink it. So did Anton Chekhov. These are documented facts. The steppe health cure attracted the greatest writers of Russian literature. They came to Kazakhstan not as conquerors, but as patients seeking something the land provided. Nowruz, the spring equinox celebration on the 22nd of March, is older than Islam in Central Asia. It is older than any documented Kazakh state. It is the day when day and night equalize, when winter ends, when the year begins. Soviet authorities banned it as a bourgeois relic. In 1988, the ban was lifted. Today, it is a 3-day national holiday. Nowruz Kozha, the ceremonial soup of 7 ingredients, was not simply food. Each ingredient carried symbolic weight: water, meat, salt, dairy, fat, grains, and a 7th element that varies by region and family. Together, they represented the 7 material and spiritual treasures essential to a good life. A bowl of soup as cosmology, an ordinary gesture holding extraordinary meaning. This is what nomadic culture learned to do: encode civilization into the portable and the edible and the audible, into what you can carry when walls are not an option. Chapter 13. The landscapes no one talks about. Most people who have heard of Kazakhstan imagine a single landscape: flat, brown, empty steppe. The image is not wrong. Steppe covers large portions of the country, but it is deeply incomplete. Charin Canyon cuts through the landscape southeast of Almaty with the authority of geological time. Red and orange rock walls rise to 300 meters. The canyon runs for more than 150 kilometers. It formed over 250 million years. At certain hours of the day, the walls shift from brick red to deep violet. There are formations called the Valley of Castles, columns and towers that look constructed rather than eroded, as if someone began building a citadel and abandoned it at a scale meant for giants. Lake Kandy appeared in 1911, created by an earthquake. A landslide sealed a mountain valley. Water filled it. The submerged spruce forest that was trapped beneath the surface did not decay. The water was too cold, too clean. The tree trunks still stand below the surface, their branches preserved, creating a photograph that looks like digital manipulation, but is entirely real. Even in summer, the water temperature stays below 8 degrees. Divers come from across the world for it. Ojira, in the Mangistau region on the western edge of the country, looks like the surface of another planet. White chalk formations, remnants of the ancient Tethys Ocean that covered this area 120 million years ago, rise from a flat plateau above vertical cliffs, dropping 300 meters to an absolutely white expanse below. Film crews have used it for science fiction backdrops. It is more extraordinary in person. The Singing Dune of Altyn ML is 150 meters high and 3 kilometers long. When wind conditions are correct, it produces a deep, resonant hum, a sound felt in the chest as much as heard with ears. The physics involve billions of sand grains of particular size moving in precise synchrony, creating standing acoustic waves. The effect has been known for centuries. Local people said simply that the dune was alive. They were not entirely wrong. The snow leopard moves through Tian Shan and Altai mountain terrain that most humans never reach. Between 150 and 180 of them live in Kazakhstan, possibly. Exact numbers are impossible to obtain from an animal that is designed, genetically and behaviorally, to be invisible. Camera traps occasionally capture them. Researchers track them by footprints, by scrapes on bark, by territorial markings. Almost no one sees them directly. The Saiga antelope, with its prehistoric inflated nose and spindly legs, survived the Ice Age and then nearly did not survive the 20th century. Populations collapsed catastrophically in the 1990s, following the Soviet collapse and the spread of unregulated hunting. Then, through protected areas and coordinated conservation, numbers began recovering in Kazakhstan. The Saiga migration, hundreds of thousands of animals moving across open steppe, is one of the great wildlife spectacles left on Earth. Almost no one in the wider world knows it happens. Chapter 14. Baikonur, where the Earth opened to the sky. There is a particular irony in the fact that the most landlocked country on Earth became the place from which humanity first left the planet. On October 4, 1957, a rocket lifted from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan's steppe and placed the first artificial satellite in orbit. The era of space had begun. The land that could not reach the ocean opened instead towards something beyond the atmosphere. On April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin was launched from the same ground. 108 minutes, one orbit around the Earth. Human beings had left their planet and returned. The launch site was in Kazakhstan. From Baikonur, all Soviet and then Russian crewed missions flew. Modules of the International Space Station were launched here. Probes sent toward Venus, Mars, and the outer solar system began their journeys from this steppe. More than 1,500 launches over decades of operation, making Baikonur the most active launch complex in history. Kazakhstan leased Baikonur to Russia after independence. The terms $115 million per year, with the lease running until 2050. Kazakhstan is simultaneously developing Botai, a new cosmodrome on the same grounds, with the intent of gradually acquiring its own launch capability. The residents of villages near Baikonur have grown up with launches as background events. At night, a fire rises from the steppe and climbs until it becomes a star, moving steadily across the sky. Children watch without alarm. They grew up knowing that the sky is closer here than elsewhere. But there is a shadow side. Spent rocket stages fall across Kazakhstan's territory after launches. The fuel used in older rocket systems, heptal, also called UDMH, is among the most toxic chemicals used in industrial applications. It does not break down quickly in the environment. Soil and groundwater contamination in impact zones has been documented for years. Communities in fall zones have limited recourse. The romance of space and the reality of its residue coexist awkwardly in the same landscape. Chapter 15. Astana and the Architecture of Ambition. In 1994, Kazakhstan announced it would move its capital. The reasons were stated as practical. Almaty sat in a seismically active zone near the Chinese border, in the far southeastern corner of the country. A capital in the center would be more accessible, more symbolic of national unity, more defensible. The unstated reasons were also real. The northern regions had large ethnic Russian populations and historical Russian presence. Placing the capital there was an assertion of sovereignty, a flag planted in territory where Kazakh statehood had not always been the dominant fact. The site chosen was a modest Soviet industrial town called Akmola. Its winters regularly reached -35°C. International reaction ranged from skepticism to open mockery. Building a new capital from nothing in one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth seemed like a demonstration of political will divorced from practical sense. It turned out to be a demonstration of both. Over the following 2.5 decades, a city grew, first slowly, then faster. Glass towers, governmental complexes, broad ceremonial avenues, cultural centers, a new opera house, hotels, universities, the Botai Monument, a tall column crowned with a golden sphere representing the mythical tree of life, the Palace of Peace and Reconciliation, a glass pyramid designed by Norman Foster. The vast new mosque, Hazrat Sultan, one of the largest in Central Asia. The city has been renamed twice since its founding, from Akmola to Astana, then briefly to Nur Sultan after the founding president, then back to Astana after he was politically distanced from official memory. The renaming and the reversal both say something about the country's ongoing negotiation with its own recent history. What Astana represents, regardless of name, is the decision to build towards something that does not yet exist, to construct a statement before the evidence arrives. Some cities grow from history. Astana was built to make it. Chapter 16. The economy and its contradictions. Kazakhstan's GDP reached $306 billion in 2025, making it the second largest economy among post-Soviet states after Russia. Growth exceeded 6% that year, driven by oil production expansion at the Tengiz field, government investment programs, and an accelerating construction and transport sector. In the first quarter of 2026, construction grew by nearly 15% and manufacturing by more than 8%. The Asian Development Bank projects continued growth above 4% through 2026. These are strong numbers for a country of 21 million people. But beneath them, the structural story is more complicated. For much of its independent history, Kazakhstan's wealth was concentrated in extraction: oil, gas, and uranium. The mining sector's share of GDP was nearly 20% in 2010. By 2025, that figure had been cut nearly in half as manufacturing and processing grew. The share of non-oil production has increased. New industrial facilities appear each year. Agricultural modernization is accelerating, with over 250 new production plants opened in 2025 alone, some involving international investment exceeding $1 billion. Kazakhstan wants to be more than a commodity exporter. It wants to be a logistics hub, a technology corridor, a regional financial center. It wants to be the pathway between China and Europe, between Central Asia and the Gulf. It wants its geographic position, once a constraint, to become an advantage. Whether that transition succeeds will determine much of the country's future. The challenges are real. Corruption remains pervasive at multiple levels of public life. Transparency International consistently ranks Kazakhstan poorly. International monitoring organizations describe patronage networks that distribute economic benefit to the politically connected, while ordinary citizens navigate daily requests for unofficial payments in healthcare, education, and bureaucratic services. Recovery of stolen public funds, while announced with growing frequency, over $30 million recovered in 2025 alone, still represents a fraction of what analysts estimate has been extracted from public resources over decades. The result is inequality that statistics alone do not capture. A country where the skyline of Astana gleams with glass and ambition, while rural regions lack adequate infrastructure. A country where elite wealth is vast and concentrated, and where young professionals look at their options and increasingly consider leaving. Brain drain is a documented and growing concern. Skilled graduates, doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs emigrate in significant numbers, not always because of poverty, but because of the gap between personal potential and available opportunity in a system still shaped by connections and loyalty rather than merit. The protests of January 2022, Kwantar, were triggered by a fuel price increase but quickly expanded to express something larger: accumulated frustration with the gap between official narratives and lived experience. Violence erupted. The state responded with force. The episode ended in official promises of a new Kazakhstan: reform, anti-monopoly measures, political adjustments. Some of those changes have been partially implemented. Others remain on paper. The country is navigating, not resolved. That honest ambiguity is not a weakness. It is the real texture of a country in motion. Chapter 17: Language, Identity, and What the Future Speaks. Kazakhstan is one of the most linguistically complex countries in the post-Soviet world. Kazakh, a Turkic language, is the state language. Russian is the official language of interethnic communication. In most urban environments, Russian remains the dominant practical language of business, media, higher education, and daily interaction. In rural areas, Kazakh is more prevalent. The division does not map neatly onto ethnicity. Many ethnic Kazakhs grew up speaking Russian as a primary language under Soviet conditions and are only now reacquiring Kazakh. The ongoing transition from Cyrillic to Latin script for the Kazakh language involves more than alphabet reform. It is a debate about the direction of cultural orientation toward the broader Turkic world and global Latin-scripted modernity, or toward continuity with the Soviet and post-Soviet Russian language sphere. The shift has moved in stages since 2017, with continuing revisions to the proposed Latin forms. It remains politically sensitive, practically complicated, and culturally significant. Multilingualism has historically been a Kazakh strength. Akins, oral poets, performed at gatherings of different peoples across the steppe, navigating between languages, borrowing words, expanding their vocabulary with each encounter. Abai translated between worlds. Modern Kazakhs code switch between Kazakh, Russian, and increasingly English, with fluency that many monolinguals regard with wonder. A country that has been crossed by so many peoples, emptied by so many catastrophes, and reconstructed so many times, develops a particular relationship to language. It learns to hear what words are carrying, not just what they say. It learns to listen for what is not spoken, for what is held in the spaces between sentences. That skill, the skill of a land that has survived silences, may be Kazakhstan's deepest cultural inheritance. Chapter 18. The country that is still becoming. Kazakhstan is 25 million square kilometers of unanswered questions. Wait, Kazakhstan is 2.7 million square kilometers. The number is correct in one system and enormous in imagination. It is a country where the distances between things require patience that modern attention spans barely allow. A country where history is not only in museums, but in the soil under your feet and the genetic structure of every apple on earth. It has been called the land of the great steppe. It has been called the country of the future. It has been called a work in progress and a natural resource and a geopolitical pivot and a blank space on the map. None of those labels are wrong. None of them are enough. The truth of Kazakhstan is that it does not fit any single frame. It produced philosophers and was destroyed by empires. It gave the world the horse and was collectivized out of its traditional existence. It sent humanity to space and was irradiated by the country that managed its territory. It almost lost a sea and then partially recovered it. It carried poetry through famines and carried music through political suppression and carried memory through the systematic attempt to erase it. A snow leopard moves through the mountains without being seen. The apple forests survive above Almaty, reduced but alive. A silver bowl holds 26 signs that no one can read. A dune in the desert hums to itself in the wind. The ruins of Otrar lie in a field waiting for excavation that may never fully come. The small Aral holds water again. This is not a triumphant story. It is not a tragic one either. It is the story of a place that has been many things and is not finished becoming. A place that gave gifts to the world before the world knew it existed. A place that has been wounded by the most extreme experiments of the 20th century. A place that is negotiating, right now, in real time, what its future will look like. A place where the past is literally under your feet. And if you stand still long enough, if you allow the noise of everything else to settle, you can hear it, low, deep, just below the threshold of ordinary hearing.